Hi, my name is Jordan Gladstone, and I'm a digital media major at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. When I came to UMass Lowell, I was undeclared. And one day I go, I know what I want to be. I want to be a communications major. So I march on down to my advisor and set up a meeting, and I go, I know what I want to be. I'm going to be a communications major. And she looks at me and she goes, we have philosophical communications. And I go, what else you got? So I end up declaring a digital media major. And when my grandfather finds out, he goes, another photographer, fantastic. And so, for reference, my grandfather has a degree in photography from RIT. He's been a photographer his entire life. And so, he was very excited when I declared digital media because he figured, oh, he's going to be a photographer. And so, he started talking cameras with me. He started going, like, check out my old equipment. And what ended up happening is I ended up getting really into photography. So I took photo one, loved it, took photography in the Azores, and I'm currently enrolled in the pro photo class at UML. The trip was about 2 weeks, and I feel like I had enough time to get the photos that I needed for an exhibit. And I feel like I got a lot of practice with a camera and I got a lot better over the course of the trip. But I feel like if there was more time, I would have kept that progression going. I would have gotten even better, and I think my photos would have shown that improvement as a result. If it were longer, it would be cool because you get to experience a lot more, but you'd get fatigued, you'd get burnt out, you would need days to just rest. And I think 2 weeks is the perfect amount of time where you can get away with work, 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 and then you get back on the plane and then you're gone. I remember one of my friends on the trip, I believe it was his great grandparents or his grandparents had emigrated to America from the island Graciosa in the Azores. And so we were on South George one day, and he looks at me and he goes, can I borrow your lens? Because I had a 70 to 200 lens on my camera. And I go, sure. And so we trade lenses, and he's focusing his lens off in the distance, and he's trying to see Graciosa. I ended up going to Piku twice throughout the trip. And so the first time we all went as like one large group, and we hiked up the mountain, and it was fantastic. The view from the top was incredible. And the second day I went back to get drone footage with another friend of mine on the trip, and we took the ferry over, we walked around the island, we took pictures, got drone footage. It was a fantastic experience. When I was there, it was interesting because you could see that there was a portion of the population who was fluent in English and another portion that was not. And so one day, some of my friends and I, we walked into a restaurant, and they look at us and they start speaking to us in Portuguese. And one of my friends responds in English and is like, hey, do you have anyone who speaks English here? And so they sat us in a different part of the restaurant because they only had one waitress who was fluent in English. Portuguese was definitely something I wish I knew. It was interesting because I've been taking Spanish here at UMass Lowell for about 2 years now. And it was interesting to see how close the two languages were, because sometimes someone would speak to me in Portuguese and I would understand them and I would be able to respond in Spanish. They don't like it when you do that, but I would respond in Spanish because it was the tool that I had. I learned how to be less fearful of taking pictures of people because I always kind of viewed the camera as something that was between me and the other person. But I learned on the trip that a lot of times it's the camera that's bringing you two together. Like there was one day I was walking along the seawall of one of the islands, and I had my camera on my neck and I'm holding it, and I see these two girls running around and they have white paint all over their hands. And so one of the traditions on the island is if your ship comes in, you're supposed to paint the name of your ship on the seawall for good luck. And so you're supposed to paint like a little square. And I see this father with his daughters painting the little square on the wall. And so the daughters run up to me and I kind of like gesture with my camera, and they hold up their hands and they pose. And it was just this kind of connection where I didn't speak their language, they didn't speak my language, but the camera brought all of us together. And as I was walking back later that night, I noticed that there was these little white handprints all over the wall. One of my favorite photos from the trip was on top of Piku. I took this picture of another person, and you just see their hair blowing in the wind, their windbreaker that's around them, it's unzipped and you can see it kind of billowing in the wind as well. And just beyond them, you can see the entirety of the island sprawling out. And that was probably one of my favorite pictures from the trip, but unfortunately it wasn't included in the exhibit. I am a big fan of using a very large aperture so that the depth of field is very small. I like doing that because you can mess around with what's in your foreground, what's in your background, and it really highlights your subject. I prefer to use the manual focus when I'm shooting pictures. When I'm cranking the manual focus, I feel like it's exactly what I want it to be, versus with autofocus, sometimes it focuses a little bit off, sometimes it's not quite right. I didn't really have much choice of which ones were put up in here. It was essentially, I was told to submit my top 50 and submit my top 10. And of those, some were chosen, some weren't. This is the first exhibit that I'm being featured in, and it's very exciting. The whole process for this was, when I got onto the trip, my photos were guaranteed to be put up here essentially, as long as I took photos. The biggest part about it was I needed to have the right photos go up. I was a big fan of a lot of my work, but I feel like I took probably 3,000 or 4,000 photos throughout the trip, and I had to narrow it down to my top 50. And it took hours upon hours of just going through photos and going, no, 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 yes, no, 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 no. And once I narrowed it down to my top 50, going down to my top 10 was really, really difficult. I think in the future, I would submit it to festivals, different exhibits, maybe even just post it online just so that other people can enjoy it. Right now, photography is more so for class for me. I don't really have a ton of free time between my 3 jobs and my 4 classes and other activities and whatnot that I do. So photography is a hobby or just for classes right now. But in the future, I could see myself doing it professionally or expanding on my knowledge about it. I think that having this work and having the ability to share it is a fantastic thing, because what is art if not to be shared, you know? The exhibit is in U Crossing on the 2nd and 3rd floors, and it will be up through the end of the semester.